Hello and welcome to Identerati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and today is episode 131. A quick reminder, please follow IOH on LinkedIn and contact me if you would like to propose an episode. Our guest today is Dhaval Desai, Janssen Project Community Manager. Welcome, Dhaval.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for having me on this episode. And I think we have lots to talk about. It's been a long, great journey. So let's get started.
I love your Agama T-shirt. That's a very limited print edition T-shirt. Before we dive in, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you landed as community manager at Janssen Project?
Okay, so as I said, it's been a long journey. I started my career as a software developer uh, in a service-based company, and then moved on to the Hawaii R&D, where I kind of worked really close with the telecom products. Then I kind of climbed that hierarchy, stayed in the corporate world for a long time. I worked with Citibank software development for 6 to 7 years. So before joining Janssen project in, I think, 5 years back, almost 5 years back,
Hmm.
uh, I was my career was all throughout in a corporate world, right? Open source was new to me. uh, I joined because it somewhere I wanted to see that how uh, software development works without a hierarchy, right? Without uh, and solely with help of consensus and
Yeah.
community. And how do you bring value from that setup? So that has been my motivation, and I joined Janssen project 2021 maybe. I don't remember exactly, but it's been a great journey since then. Thank you,
Cool.
Mike.
Um, you mentioned that you joined 5 years back. Well, that's not
Almost.
coincidental because that's when we started Janssen Project, really.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll start by giving a little bit of history. Um, so Glue was always open source. It was a MIT license at first, and then we switched to Apache 2 license. But it was always governed under GitHub/Glue Federation. So
Yeah.
we governed it, um, and the Glue is our trademark. Um, so I in 2018 and 2019 and 2020, I was recording a podcast about open source and trying to figure out how do we balance open source at Glue and how does it help contribute to the business model. And I came to the conclusion that the governance of the project was a problem, that nobody wants to contribute to your commercial product.
Yeah.
Um, and that we see that with open source projects under the brand or trademark of the company, they get very few community contributions and very little community collaboration. HashiCorp's a good example. So Terraform got almost no contributions from the community. It was all HashiCorp employees. But when the project got forked and it got moved to Linux Foundation and became open tofu, actually a lot of community contributions started pouring in. Um, so I was convinced that if we really wanted to get the benefit of the open source development methodology, we needed um, to move the governance to a community governance model, um, and that we needed to move not just the code, which was already open source, but we really needed to put it under a different trademark because Glue was our commercial trademark, and we needed an upstream open source trademark that was more freely usable, where it was the code and the trademark that you can use, and that enabled the community to build. Um, we basically decided Red Hat was right, and that the Fedora Red Hat model is the right model. Like everyone knows, Fedora is a different product. People actually use it in production. It's a great product, and companies know when they buy Red Hat that they're getting a commitment to support it for a certain amount of time, and it's coming under a commercial license. So we decided we needed to switch to that model, and we forked the software, Glue4 software, and changed the name, which was difficult, and decided to fix the configuration layer, which we felt was old from the time we started the project in 2009 till to
Yeah.
2020. So there's a little bit of a ground up rewrite in there. And that's the point at which we brought you in and said, okay, we need to start thinking about the community. This has been a project that's just really been a Glue only contributor project, but we want to open it up to the community, and so we want to start doing outreach and catalyzing that. So it's been a hard assignment for you because you're building the community basically from nothing, from just
Yeah.
internal Glue people.
It
Um,
I think when I just before I joined, we got inducted into the Linux Foundation. So one question that I have for you is that why Linux Foundation? I mean, what made you uh, kind of
hmm,
decide that okay, we want to push and because getting entry into Linux Foundation is fairly difficult. So a lot of hard work must have been committed to that.
yeah. So initially, we looked at contributing Glue to CNCF because we are very cloud native. That's our preferred production deployment method. And so we're very pro Kubernetes and cloud native. And so we thought at first we'd contribute it to CNCF. I think I even wrote a proposal for that. Um, and it seemed like it was going to take a while. And it also seemed like Glue wasn't a good fit for CNCF. That actually, although we liked cloud native stuff, we still have VMs and we still like publishing VM distributions. So we were not um, only cloud native. Um, and also, we felt that um, um, we would have more control if we had our own sort of governance process rather than trying to fit into the CNCF. We looked at a number of other options for different organizations. Actually, like we considered Apache Foundation. Um, I think Eclipse is underrated. Eclipse Foundation. So we looked at a number. We decided on Linux Foundation because we felt like it was the most synergistic. The projects in Linux Foundation were very synergistic with what we were doing.
Yeah. And
For
I think
example,
in our
yeah,
current stack, we are using a lot of projects from the Linux Foundation itself, right?
mhm,
A lot of orchestration, cloud orchestration, and those stack is from Linux Foundation project itself, right? So
correct. Yeah, like so much of the software. So even Keycloak, which is part of our stack. So because CNCF is actually a Linux Foundation subchartered organization, any project in CNCF is still a sister project for us.
yeah.
Um, and we're using Keycloak as the SAML component of our enterprise SSO stack. Um, so yeah, and we're a self-funded Linux Foundation organization, so we have a lot of autonomy. Um, they did help with setting up the governance and the IP of the project, which was very helpful. We are using some Linux Foundation infrastructure, for example, the open source disclosure and reporting. There's a number of security
Yeah.
tools that Linux Foundation offers that we're taking advantage of. Um, and in general, we found it to be synergistic with other Linux Foundation projects.
And I
Um,
think one thing that specifically helped. I mean, when you move a project into, let's say, a newly baked into open source project, it's probably just the code, right? Working piece of code. Now, to make it into a mature open source project that has the governance, that has the uh, standard processes, that has uh, the, the the whatever the community expects from a matured open source project,
Yeah.
right? To get to that place, a lot of guidance we got from the Linux Foundation, right? Their best practices and a lot of other things like governance and all. Plus, we worked a lot on setting up and getting guidance from the GitHub, how the more mature larger projects work, right? So today, let's say 4 years down the line, Janssen project is probably what a lot of other projects can look at to see how a open source project is professionally maintained and managed, right?
Yeah.
Be it the contribution guidelines, or be it how the community and discussions are managed, right? Security aspects, how they are managed. So all these things we have baked in those best practices, both from Linux Foundation, GitHub, and other projects like Kubernetes, right? We have baked these processes into Janssen project. A lot of
And the
automation
open
on top of
source,
that.
yeah, and the open source, what we're talking about is the transparency of that.
Yeah,
A lot of these software projects might have these good practices, but trust but verify. Um, there's a good saying at Red Hat: "Nothing builds trust like source code." So
yeah,
it's one thing to say you have best practices, but if you can actually show through a lot of transparency, which I think the open source development methodology sort of values.
brings. Yeah,
Yeah, that what we're really talking about is the software supply chain, right? And
yeah,
I really feel like people forget what's in the infrastructure. Like people forget about the network. Like we still have routers out there that are routing packets, like the telecom stuff you did in the beginning of your career,
yeah,
like that stuff's still there. Um, and I think the code, to a certain extent, people start to take for granted. A lot of the attention is on the top of the value chain. So we're thinking about the AI applications, but that AI layer is running on a mountain of infrastructure. And
true.
that mountain of infrastructure is unfortunately kind of rotting because every week we have new CVEs. Like, some researcher found this vulnerability in this thing, and that thing's part of like this package that runs one of the servers that you're running your AI thing on.
Yeah, and
And
and the
so,
log4j incidents that happened probably last year or year before,
yeah.
that was a kind of very harsh reminder of what you're saying right now, right? Because there is a lot of software which you are reusing, right? The third party libraries and all, and CVEs are reported every day thanks to a lot of automation that we have in Janssen server. uh, we get prompted proactively by the bots and the scanners that
Mhm.
CVEs are there. You go ahead and fix it, and a lot of community contribution goes into fixing these things, right? Because when you change one library, it takes a lot of testing to make sure it's not breaking anything else, right? So CVEs and kind of keeping those high security ratings for your own software, it's always a moving target, and it's a continuous process.
Yeah, Log4j wasn't unusual. Log4j is happening every day. It's people
Yeah,
just don't normally notice.
yeah,
So it's interesting when they actually notice when one of these CVEs actually rises to the top and gets sort of general interest attention.
yeah,
Um, and and so one of the goals of Janssen Project was to build a home for enterprise um, identity and access management infrastructure, for stuff used by domains. Um, and so our structure of the project is almost like CNCF. It's not one project, but it's a number of sub projects, each
yeah,
with their own sort of maturity level. And what we're trying to do is create an engine for innovation, because what happens with a lot of infrastructure projects is they stop innovating. And because infrastructure can be in production for a long time, 10 to 15 to 20 years, You want to know that what you're buying today is still going to be not only kept up to date with all those patches, but is also going to be supporting the new features that you're going to need in like 10 to 15 years. And that it's been hard for commercial vendors to actually maintain this level of innovation over time in the infrastructure space. And the theory is that open source is better at sort of is an engine for innovation. I don't know, Deval. So you're
Yeah.
5 years in. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. And the open source model helps you ground your innovation into the real problems, right? Because uh, usually what we see first is the demand coming from the community, right? We see that the discussions are happening around certain topics, and certain pattern is coming out of those discussions, right? And then we know that okay, this is a real problem and we need to fix those. Correct. So that's where the open source model helps, right? You're not building software within your own world, but you are building it openly. Community is always giving you feedback whether you are on the right trajectory or not. So yes, innovation is there, but more importantly, open source makes it grounded into the real problems, right? That's the
Yeah,
value that Janssen brings.
that's an interesting point, and I guess it's obvious, but I hadn't really thought about that. But you're right. Inputs are coming in from the community, and I guess I see it also as an opportunity for a number of companies to collaborate. So sometimes it's not the interest from the community, but some project that's interested in something that has funding, and that area ends up getting researched. Um, like take open banking, for example. Um,
Yeah.
you know, um, but yeah, I think that the innovation is not guaranteed because it's open source. You have to work at outreach, and you have to
Yeah.
work at um, the building the community. And a lot of times, I think me and you, Deval, probably spend more time talking about docs than anything else.
Yeah.
Um, why
Yeah,
do you
because
think?
that is what people hit very first, right? So as soon as they look at a project, the next thing they want to see is where are the documents? How do I install these things, right? How do I get my very basic use case up and running to get the real taste of the software? So yeah, that's why we keep on talking about documentation, and we have put in a lot of hard work in building I believe good documentation.
Can you give a couple of insights into this? Because the documentation is part of the code, really. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you say? Like maybe, like, what does it look like to do docs in a well-run open source project today? Just let's say using Janssen as an example. What do we do?
So yeah, so basically, Janssen, as you mentioned, it's a lot of open source components around IAM coming together, right, under one single project. So documentation has to really tie those components together, right? uh, be it in terms of how to use component A with component B and build a complete solution, right? And on top of that, each component has its own configuration, which you need to kind of neatly lay out. A lot of documentation goes into that direction, where because we are a kind of infrastructure software, right?
Yeah,
um, Configuration takes probably 80% of focus, because a lot of features are enabled, disabled, and things like that happen through the configuration. So a lot of documentation goes behind that. Another important thing that we have been building and we are trying to still build is documentation around the use cases and the solutions, right? We have documentation around each component, how it works, how to integrate that with other components, but how do you put together a complete use case, right? Be it a simple authentication using an SMS OTP, okay, or maybe how do I implement passkey in my project, or something related to the authorization. um, so a lot of documentation has to go towards describing an entire use case uh, to get people started, right? Eventually there are, I mean, millions of use cases. You can't target all of them, but at least to get people started and give them a flavor of how to build a solution out of Janssen components. That's the purpose of the documentation that we have. That's what we are targeting, at least.
Um, and in terms of the sort of the new priorities, so it seems like when we first started Janssen, a lot of the effort was just porting like what we had, right? We had
Yeah,
all this software in Glue 4. We're making sure that all of the features, especially the configuration layer, made it into Glue Flex. And this is where the rule about the never do the ground up rewrite sort of like applied to us, because we built this configuration layer, um, and then we basically built a whole new configuration layer up from scratch. And they say about the ground up rewrite is that it takes you a long time just to get where you were, so you can't move forward until you actually catch up.
yeah,
So it
and it
seems like the early part we were doing a lot of that catch up work.
yeah,
Um, and now that we've sort of caught up, and now Janssen project is more advanced than the old project, definitely.
yeah,
Now I feel like we're actually benefiting from that work that we did in the ground up rewrite that we questioned ourselves about. Um, and well, what do you see as sort of the areas of innovation of Janssen Project? As the as the BD, I have my own priorities as sort of product owner. But for you, as somebody who's doing outreach, what do you think are the growth areas where you see interest from community?
So, from the community perspective, as I mentioned, we have to give them some of the infrastructure as a turnkey projects, right? So, our target right now and what we are working towards, or what we want to work towards, is how do you give them only to run couple of commands, and entire application comes up with Janssen server configured already, and they can hit the application and see the login page. They can easily configure the SMS OTP and stuff like that. So to give community a clear taste of this software, that's where I think the next or the current our focus is
Uh-huh.
to give them more of a turnkey small use cases which can be easily deployed, right?
Mm.
That's one very important thing that we are focusing on right now.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is a sort of moving to a more developer focus in
Yep.
terms of the project orientation, and I think that's interesting because the project does have more of a developer orientation. We're talking about starring it on GitHub, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about pretty geeky people probably to start with. Um, so I think
I
that that's
think
true.
one more thing that I want to just kind of bring about here is that developer is at the one end of the spectrum, right? The other end of the spectrum is probably the CTOs and the identity architects, which are kind of evaluating products from a completely different perspective, right? So while developer wants to quickly run the project and see where the code is and how can I change this configuration and do that, what uh, a solution or the identity architect or a CTO might be interested in knowing is that, and primarily from the documentation, is that how will this software give me is the solution that I want in my scenarios? Does it have all the capabilities that are required to kind of adopt it in our enterprise, right? Because enterprise is a large it's a very big monolith, right? There might be hundreds of use cases, different scenarios that CISOs or probably identity architects want to address. So documentation, or the I would say the content that we are putting out has to address that also, that part of this people at the that end of spectrum as well, right? So that's also another focus.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it is a challenge. And I think it's interesting to me to see how the documentation gets built, because we have certain parts that are really like, if you introduce a new endpoint, we have an endpoints place where all the list is. We have Swagger or Open API docs that must be created. And so there's a lot of formalization in certain parts of it. And then other parts, like you're mentioning, about how does the management get business value and govern it. And from my perspective, I also hear a lot of deployment issues. Like I feel like it's half deployment, half functional, and maybe like 5% like design and architecture and sort of governance stuff. Um, but I've noticed in the industry that there's more SaaS solutions out there than software. Like most domains, where their first choice is to use a SaaS solution, and only late if they're forced to self-host will they. But Glue Flex is a platform for self-hosting, so we have a lot of deployment information there about Kubernetes and Terraform and Helm charts and that kind of stuff. Um, but any thoughts, Dhaval, about the the deployment challenges that we're seeing that's new? Like it's gotten easier for most companies because they're using cloud, but it seems like it's also gotten harder for a lot of companies if they actually decide to self-host because the tooling has gotten so deep and so complex. So, any thoughts about challenges around um, documenting and keeping up with all the operational stuff?
Yeah. So basically, see, earlier we had VM solutions, right? And then when we moved to the cloud native, I think the yes, the deployment process is maybe more knowledge intensive, right? That you need to know the cloud native tools and stuff like that to deploy the solution. But I think the once it is deployed, the upgrade and the keep up processes, right?
Hmm.
They have been really been smoothened out because of the cloud native approach, right?
Hmm.
I think uh, we are
Upgrading
still
used to be
we are,
really hard, and now it's really easy, right? Is that what
yeah.
you're
So
saying?
correct. So if I think we are seeing a lot of tickets and the concerns uh, from the people who are not or the deployments which are not cloud native, when they try to upgrade from, let's say, 4.5 to 4.5.9, right? There is a lot of manual stuff going on, and unfortunately everything cannot be documented in that sense, right? But
Hmm.
we are seeing really less of such complaints when the deployments are cloud native, right? When it comes to the upgrade and regular operations, I think the cloud native makes it really easy. Yes, the initial there is a hump initially at the first deployment, but I think that's well worth it. And
Hmm.
I think that also is a reflection of the fact that a lot of people are not are, are still learning how to deploy the cloud native solutions, right? The knowledge base that is there in the industry in general, it's still, I think, not there around cloud native.
Right.
People are
So if
still
you're a
learning.
young person, take those Kubernetes cloud native courses.
Yes,
Your
definitely.
skills will be
I
needed.
think they have
Yeah.
already taken it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So I wanted to ask you about the Cedarling, because this is a new product that's getting a lot of attention. It's probably the biggest new product we've introduced since Agama, really.
Yeah,
Um, but any thoughts about the challenges of rolling out this product, which Agama is really it's an incremental improvement over something we were doing already, which
yeah,
is um, orchestrating identity login flows, mobile or web, right?
yeah,
But the Cedarling is something that we never used to do. It's a new product entirely. It's a new project at the Janssen project, rather, with its own set of assets. It can use any tokens. It doesn't need Janssen tokens. It can use Keycloak tokens or Entra tokens or Auth0 tokens or Okta tokens, whatever. Um, but I'd love to get your feedback, sort of as the community manager, on this new project and some of the challenges around it. It's a hard new project, I think, product, and it's not even really fully. I feel like we still have a way to go to really get it to. Its MVP is out there, but I feel like it's still developing quite rapidly. But any thoughts on that? On the challenges around Cedarling launch?
So I think the Cedarling, we have launched the MVP, right? It's out there on the in the Janssen repository. People can take it and deploy it and try it out. Uh, I think what is more important is to understand how the idea of Cedarling came about, right? Uh, so there has been a lot of innovation in the authorization space. Which is not standards driven, right? Like cedar language being open sourced by the Amazon, right?
Hmm.
We have OPA, we have other authorization tools, languages, and frameworks that are coming about. So there is a lot of movement in this market, and Cedarling is an innovation in the same direction, right? So Cedarling makes it's an embeddable PDP, very lightweight, right? It can work and can be deployed in your browser, and you can kind of reduce your dependence on the backend to understand what authorization is available to this particular user, or probably a non-human identity. So Cedarling comes from there, right? And now what we need to using this MVP, we need to see where uh, the community is finding out its usage, right? We have our hypothesis that it can be used in normal applications, right? All the web applications embedding Cedarling in the different form factors, right? So Cedarling can be embedded in the browser. It can work as a sidecar on the server, and many other ways of deploying it. So we need to see how this MVP has been taken up by the community, right? Plus, we are, as you know, we are interviewing the lot of other channels where we see that, okay, CEDAR or the an embedded uh, policy decision point can be useful. For example, we recently talked about the uh, securing the data, right? Data authorization. So yeah, I think it will we have to watch the community and how the uptake is, for what use cases they are using Cedarling, and then I think we'll get a real feel of uh, where this MVP is going and what new features to build, and in what direction to take Cedarling in. So I think
Yeah,
we have to keep an eye open and keep on validating our hypothesis based on which we have built the Cedarling.
yeah. It's been I think that as a new product, the Cedarling has been challenging because it's enterprise infrastructure, um, but it's also client software.
Yeah,
So it's embedded in the client. So it's a different type of product than we typically, normally we ship infrastructure that runs sort of in your data center. It's mission critical. It's very protected. We don't normally ship software that runs in your browser or in your mobile device, like
Yeah.
SDKs almost, let's say. And the Cedarling could be thought of as an SDK, I guess, um, because we have bindings to different languages like Java, Python, Go, C. Um, so I think for one of the challenges is just that it's like a different type of product. But I think it fit within the Janssen project because um, the last mile of authorization, which actually happens in the browser or in the mobile, the edge of the network, um, I think that's an important piece of the puzzle for security for companies. I think they really need so to set policies across all their applications, including the edge of the network, and they need logs back from on the security and decisions from all their applications, including the edge. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a
So
different kind of product than we typically launch. Um, and yeah, as you point out, Dhaval, we're looking, so a product only matters if people use it.
yeah.
Um, and so we're looking for hard problems to solve with the Cedarling, um, like data problems, for example. Um, I had good feedback from one of our engineers on the Cedarling team who was looking at building a PostgreSQL plugin for doing row level filtering. Um, and so I think the key is that we are flushing out sort of we think that enterprises need a way to better centralize policy management and centralize the collection of security logs. Um, and so the Cedarlink can help them especially detect more threats. Um, and but in order to coalesce this or catalyze this market, um, we need to sort of find out like who can the Cedarling help today, and see if we can align with that with a group like that. Ultimately, the open source methodology is a meritocracy. If nobody adopts it, then then that sort of answers. So it's. I feel like the Cedarling is kind of been kicked out of the nest. So and we'll see if it can fly, type of mode, um, where the theory, the MVP sort of shows the theory. It's not perfect yet. There's optimizations that can be done there, but um, um, but it's probably enough of the functionality. Maybe if it has 80% of the functionality, um, that we can see, like, can this actually help companies better secure data or better secure API gateways or better secure websites or mobile applications, and improve their security and improve their threat detection. So I think we'll see how it goes. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think we also have to look at Cedarling from uh, in conjunction with the for example features that we are building like log server, right? So it's not just how fast and how we do the authorization, uh, centralization of the logs and reporting also matters a lot, right? So does the market currently have any such product which gives you centralized authorization logs along with the policy centralization, right? I
yeah,
think some of these value propositions are, if you look at a couple of components together, they bring out more value than just focusing on one component. What value does it give, right? So I
right.
think we have a fair case, and we'll see some adoption very soon.
It's a good point that uh, the Janssen project is about enterprise IAM components. And so the Cedarling by itself is one of the components, but the value to the enterprise is centralization is what actually saves money. So the more applications we can centralize and manage from one place, the more operational leverage we have, the better so the security and we actually save money. Um,
Yeah.
and so lock, it's, I don't think it's fair to say like that, well, we created a problem by putting the PDPs at the edge. So when you had one policy decision point in the center, getting the logs from it was easy. You just pipe that straight into Splunk. Um, but if you have every mobile app and every browser now is running the PDP locally and creating its own logs, you've now created a problem where your logs are spread out. And so the lock server um, talks to all of those distributed seederlings and gets the logs. So I think we created the problem in the architecture by putting the PDPs at the edge. But lock, I think, connects the technology to the enterprise because there is a benefit. You need those logs from the edge. In a disconnected use case, you don't want to use a centralized solution that might fail. So there are good use cases why you want to decentralize PDP, but you need those logs from the PDP. So the lock server connects it to the enterprise, and ultimately it ties back to um, um, to Janssen project being enterprise infrastructure for a domain. Because really, like our end users at the end of the day is the IT team who has economies of scale to operate this kind of very sort of high-end infrastructure, um, and is thinking about things like centralizing policy management and centralizing threat detection, and has multiple applications that each have their own security models and are looking for ways to have less one-offs for security. um, I have this saying in IT, every one-off is like costs you money. You want to reduce one-offs. And so right now, every application out there is a one-off for authorization. Thankfully, they all use the same authentication layer now, so they all use OpenID. But still, every application is a one-off for authorization. Standards, um, obviously I'm on the Cedar bandwagon. I think that is a unique invention when it comes to defining schema and policies together in a very useful way. And it is, I don't know about standards based. They're contributing it as open source to CNCF. That doesn't make it a standard.
Yeah.
Um, but it is open. And actually, it is managed as a standard by Cedar. For example, we put in an RFC today to get them to support archive files, right? So it's, I don't know, it's standard-ish, um, but um, um, but I think we have standard interfaces for authorization, like authzen, which tells you how to send a request. But we have Cedar provides the first standard for expressing policies in a standard way. Zacmel tried to do that, but they didn't do. But it's XML, so just forget it. It doesn't work. Um, but I think Cedar is really the first reasonable attempt to do that. Um, there's some others out there. Rego is worth mentioning. So Rego is a programming language. It's not a policy syntax per se. So it's you couldn't do a static analysis and iterate through all. So it's different. Rego could be very useful. Like for example, I want to iterate through all the tokens. Like you can't do that in Cedar, right? You have to be able to reference each token. So there's limitations of not having a programming language. But when you accept those limitations, you get something that's deterministic. So I think Cedar is an important invention, um, and that's sort of the bet that we're making, is that the market will recognize that there's actually nothing out there really like that, and so in a way, the Cedarlink component is very opinionated. If you also believe in Cedar, and you're looking for a Cedar PDP, a local Cedar PDP, it's very niche in that area too. I guess what we have to see is, does that niche actually exist? Amazon's making this big push on Cedar and AVP, um, but is the market actually going to catch up and decide that they're right and that Cedar's a good thing? And then would they want something like a local PDP with better logging capabilities and better management capabilities?
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess
I
we
think
will find
it's
out.
a growing ecosystem, so we all need to kind of wait a little bit more before it gets to that maturity, right? Like you mentioned, we put in an RFC to kind of with the CDR so that they can recommend a way where enterprises can bring their schema and the policies together, right? So this is still a growing ecosystem. I think it is still a little bit of time before it matures to a level, right?
I don't think the project's even really 1 year old,
Yeah.
because the current version of the Cedarling, which Bajak we trashed all the code. We started probably in May of last year. We worked over the summer. We didn't like what we gave, what we made, and we threw it out. Um, and I believe Bajak's initial commits were probably sometime around September. So the project is not even a year old yet. So this is a really new project. So yeah, I think this is where a lot of the innovation is. Um, we didn't talk, we got distracted, of course, with the new thing. We didn't talk about Flex, but I shouldn't say Flex, I should say Jan's auth server, which is, of course, the upstream open source. But auth server has a lot of innovation too. We've introduced status lists. We've introduced the first party authentication, the Auth challenge endpoint that's used for mobile app authentication. Um, we've introduced really a lot of features into Flex also. Any one thing I'm curious what your thoughts are though. Are we going to see another major change of version of Flex, or is Auth Server basically stable now? And we don't expect. Do you think we should expect to see any major changes to Auth Server, or do we eventually, publish? I don't know. What's our version right now? One dot um,
Nine. Nine.
1.9. Do we
Yeah.
eventually see 1 dot like 143, or do you think that there's a 2.0 or a 3.0?
I think that is really it's we are not forcing a feature in the auth server as such,
Yeah.
which will which will necessitate a major version change, right?
Hmm.
But the major version change might happen because of uh, there are other components also, right, that go into the same release. uh, Fido, for example, right? So there are, I think the auth server is not going to see a huge feature that will pump a kind of a major version, but maybe because of the other components that are there in the mix.
Hmm.
And the major version doesn't just change because of a new feature getting introduced.
Yeah.
Even if there is a breaking change or something, some other thing, we
Yeah.
follow the semantic versioning, right? So there are a lot of different triggers to change a major version.
Yeah. So what's your prediction? In 10 years, is it one, dot 143, or do you think we actually could ever do a major version release of Auth Server again?
No, no, I think we will see one major version change once in a year, or at the max in 2 years, right? I think that's what we have been seeing. uh, till now we have not been following the because everything was very new, right? So we added a lot of features but we didn't change the major version. But I think what we have been seeing, every 1 or 2 year we'll see a major version change has been
Hmm.
requires, right? So that's what I think. Within 10 years, we definitely will move to probably 4.0 or something like that. That's
Hmm.
what I think.
Okay. Last thoughts before we call it. You survived your first episode of IOH.
Yeah. So I think the the open source model is working well for Janssen, and I think and I believe that it's going to work for a lot of other projects which are maybe thinking of moving into this model. Uh, and we are getting a lot of value out of the community and the community processes, right? And as I mentioned initially, that it keeps us and our innovation grounded into the real problems. uh, so that's what I think, that we need to continue to build more docs and the content which are focusing on developers as well as the decision makers. uh, so all these things put together, I think we are on a really nice track.
Yeah. Well, it is a lot of work. Dhaval, thank you so much for everything you do as community manager. And it's a tough assignment. And I want to announce the next episode. Um, we're actually going to do an episode on Phaeton. Um, has a new FIDO key management platform, sort of like how certificates can be issued. You can have a platform for certificate or smart card management. This is a FIDO key management platform. It's open source software. I talked to them at Identiverse. They wanted to promote it, so it's finally happening next Tuesday. So please join us. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Dhaval, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me on this episode.